Welcome back, seekers of the strange and unseen. Today we unveil the hidden truth of the dream warriors, secrets of the Benandanti. In the rugged heart of northeastern Italy, nestled between the Alps and the Adriatic, lies Friuli. During the 16th and 17th centuries, this was a land steeped in ancient rhythms. The turning of the seasons, the toil of the harvest, a life lived close to the earth. It was an agrarian world, where the fertility of the fields meant the difference between survival and starvation. Daily peasant life unfolded under the cycles of planting and reaping, governed by the demands of the land and the authority of local lords and the church. Yet beneath this surface existence, under the watchful eye of religious authorities and amid the growing shadow of the witch hunt sweeping Europe, moved a hidden current, a secret society bound by destiny and dreams. They called themselves the Benandanti, the good walkers. By day they were peasants, millers, town criers, artisans, indistinguishable from their neighbors in the villages and fields of Friuli. But by night, on certain sacred dates, tied to the church calendar yet echoing older seasonal rites, they claimed their spirits embarked on extraordinary journeys, leaving their sleeping bodies behind to wage war in the unseen realms. Their battlefield, the fertile fields of Friuli, their sworn enemy, malevolent witches and warlocks, known as the Malandanti, or evil walkers, who sought to blight the crops, steal the wine, and poison the community. The Benandanti's purpose was clear and vital: to protect the harvest, to ensure abundance, to fight for the good of their people. This is their story, a tale woven from peasant beliefs and visionary experiences, a narrative of dream warriors, folk magic, and a fateful collision of worlds that would ultimately draw them into the fearsome halls of the Roman Inquisition. Their existence highlights a profound contrast between the ordinary, often harsh, realities of agrarian life and an extraordinary hidden nocturnal life steeped in magic and spiritual duty, revealing the complex layers of belief that coexisted in early modern rural society. What set a Benandante apart from others in their community? It was not a path chosen nor an initiation undergone, but a mark of fate bestowed at the very moment of birth. Across Friuli, and indeed in folklore throughout much of Europe, potent beliefs surrounded children born with the caul, that is, with a fragment of the amniotic sac still clinging to their head like a veil. Such births were uncommon, and the caul itself was widely regarded as possessing magical properties. It was thought to offer protection to soldiers in battle, to grant lawyers success in court, or simply to signify an unusual destiny awaiting the child. While broader European superstitions sometimes associated being born with the caul with a predisposition towards witchcraft, within the specific context of Friulian tradition, the Benandanti held the opposite view. For them, the caul was a sign of divine election, a holy mark designating them as protectors chosen by God Himself to join the ranks of the good walkers. These individuals, who could be either male or female, were recognized, perhaps even actively recruited into the fellowship later in life because of this birth sign. Testimonies suggest some Benandanti carefully preserved their cauls, wearing them in pouches around their necks as protective talismans during their nocturnal journeys, and it was even claimed that masses were sometimes celebrated over these membranes to enhance their spiritual power. This innate power, bestowed by birth rather than acquired through learning or forbidden pacts, marked the Benandanti as fundamentally different, operating through a spiritual legitimacy derived directly from their fated origin. This inherent power wasn't believed to be confined solely to the night battles. In their waking lives, Benandanti were often sought out within their communities as healers. They were thought capable of diagnosing illnesses caused by witchcraft and, crucially, of counteracting the harmful spells cast by the Malandanti, particularly those afflicting children. They functioned as guardians in both the dream world and the waking one, their identity rooted in an ambiguous sign, the call, that simultaneously marked them as chosen by God, and in the eyes of wider superstition, potentially linked them to the very forces they fought. This inherent ambiguity, a God-given power signified by a mark sometimes associated with witches, created a fundamental tension, a vulnerability that the Inquisition would later seize upon in its efforts to understand and categorize these unusual individuals. While both men and women were designated by the call, their reported nocturnal activities often differed, hinting at specialized roles within the group despite their shared origin. The summons to their nocturnal duties often came during the Ember Days, specific Thursdays occurring 4 times a year, aligned with periods of fasting and prayer in the Catholic liturgical calendar, yet clearly holding older pre-Christian seasonal significance for the Benandanti related to the agricultural cycle. Witnesses provided compelling accounts of encountering Benandanti during these times. The miller Pietro Rotaro, seeking a cure for his son, and the wives of Benandanti men described finding their loved ones in a state resembling a profound sleep or trance. The body would be cold, unresponsive, even to repeated shaking or calling, seemingly left behind as an empty vessel, while the individual's true essence journeyed elsewhere. How did they perceive these journeys? The Benandanti consistently spoke of traveling not in the flesh, but invisibly in spirit. They described their spirits leaving their dormant bodies, sometimes taking the form of small animals, commonly found in the countryside, mice, cats, rabbits, or even butterflies. Some accounts, perhaps linking to deeper, more primal layers of European folklore, even mention the form of wolves. Their travel involves soaring through the night sky, often riding astride animals like hares or goats, heading towards distant fields for their gatherings and battles, sometimes traveling remarkable distances, even as far as Verona, according to some testimonies. The nature of these experiences remains debated. Were they vivid dreams, culturally shaped hallucinations, or genuine trance states? The historical record offers no definitive physiological explanation. Attempts to link them to psychoactive ointments or conditions like epilepsy lack firm evidence. What is undeniable, however, is the profound conviction with which the Benandanti experienced and reported these journeys as real, purposeful actions undertaken within their specific understanding of the cosmos. These spirit journeys were not always direct flights to the battlefield. Testimonies recount the Benandanti passing invisibly through villages, sometimes making clandestine stops at neighbors' cellars. The good walkers claimed they would help themselves to wine, drinking it while unseen. In contrast, the malevolent witches, if they found no bowl of clean water left outside for them as custom dictated, were said to spitefully defile the wine casks, urinating in them. These seemingly minor, almost folkloric details reveal a belief system where the boundaries between the spirit world and the material world were permeable. Actions taken in spirit were believed to have tangible, direct consequences in the physical realm, spoiled wine, or more critically, the success or failure of the harvest, reinforcing the perceived importance and efficacy of the Benandanti's nocturnal activities. Their journeys were not mere fantasy, but were understood as vital interventions shaping the community's reality. The very heart of the Benandanti's secret nocturnal mission lay in the ritual clashes known as the night battles. 4 times a year, coinciding precisely with the ember days that mark the crucial turning points of the agricultural seasons, the spirits of the good walkers convened in the fields under the cover of darkness. Their stated purpose was explicit and unwavering: to engage in combat with the Malandanti, the evil witches and warlocks whose malevolent magic threatened the fertility of the land and the survival of the community. The testimonies collected by the Inquisition paint a vivid, almost cinematic picture of these spectral encounters. The Benandanti forces were organized, often led by a captain, sometimes described in trial records as a specific nobleman with a red beard, or even, according to Paolo Gasparotto, guided by a golden angel hovering near their flag. They carried banners of white silk, symbols of their righteous cause, sometimes adorned with a lion emblem or markings of gold. Crucially, they asserted that they fought in favor of Christ, framing their struggle within a Christian cosmology. Their weapons, however, were humble yet deeply symbolic: stalks of fennel. This plant, associated with protection and clarity, may have held additional significance, possibly being the same viburnum mentioned by Gasparotto as carried behind crosses during Christian rogation processions, rituals specifically intended to bless the fields and ensure good crops. Their adversaries, the Malandanti, represented the opposing force of destruction and sterility. They were said to wield stalks of sorghum, a grain significant because it was the material commonly used to make witches' brooms. Their banners reflected their dark allegiance, described as being red or yellow and marked with images of black devils. The battle itself appears less as a literal, violent confrontation and more as a highly ritualized clash, a symbolic struggle enacted in the spirit realm between the forces of light and darkness, ultimately deciding the fate of the harvest, a contest between fertility and famine. The use of plant stalks rather than swords or spears underscores the symbolic ritual nature of the conflict, focused on agricultural outcomes rather than physical harm. The words of Battista Moduco, a town crier interrogated by the Inquisition in 1580, capture the essence of their belief. I am a Benandante because I go with the others to fight 4 times a year, that is Msors, and they with sorghum stalks. If we are victorious, then that year will be one of abundance. If we lose, then there will be famine. This statement encapsulates the core elements: spirit travel, the seasonal timing, the Christian framing, the specific weapons, and the direct link between the battle's outcome and the community's sustenance. Paolo Gasparotto, another key figure in the early trials, corroborated these accounts, describing companies of fighters under specific captains and emphasizing the divine sanction they felt, reporting the presence of a golden angel near their flag, whom they worshipped in the name of Jesus Christ. For the Benandanti, this fight was not merely about protecting grain and grapes, it was intrinsically linked to upholding the faith of Christ against the perceived forces of the devil. This fusion of pre-Christian agrarian concerns with Christian ideology is striking. The Benandanti seamlessly integrated ancient fertility rites into their contemporary Christian worldview, seeing no contradiction in battling for crops while serving Christ. It was precisely this syncretism, this blending of worlds, that would prove so perplexing and ultimately alarming to the church authorities who encountered them. While the male Benandanti often described their night journeys as battles to protect crops from witches, the women's accounts took a different path. They spoke of traveling in spirit to radiant nocturnal feasts, gatherings filled with dancing, eating, and communion with spirits, animals, and fairies. These events weren't about conflict, but about abundance, mystery, and sacred knowledge. Presiding over these mystical feasts was a powerful female figure known by many names, Abundia Herodias, or simply the Mistress. Often described as seated in splendor by a well, she echoes ancient goddesses like Diana, Holda, or Pershta, leaders of night processions and guardians of fate. Under her guidance, the Benandanti women were said to receive deep truths. Among them, revelations about who in their village was destined to die in the coming year. With their role as healers and protectors against witchcraft, the Benandanti, both men and women, were central figures in their communities. They weren't just guardians of the harvest, but intermediaries with the spirit world. Their practices included spirit flight, animal transformation, ritual battles for fertility, feasts with supernatural beings, healing and divination, echoing the work of shamans across various cultures. These layered roles inspired historian Carlo Ginzburg to propose a bold, though debated, theory that the Benandanti were remnants of an ancient pan-European shamanic tradition, predating Christianity. He drew links between them and other visionary groups, like Livonian werewolves, who claimed to battle demons for the grain. The contrast between male and female roles, combat versus feasting and divination, suggests a complementary spiritual system rooted in deep folk memory. At its center stands the mysterious female figure, the abbess or goddess, connecting their tradition to older beliefs in nocturnal deities and spirit processions. For generations, the Benandanti practiced their secret rites quietly, woven into the rhythms of Friulian peasant life, largely unnoticed by the church. But in 1575, their hidden world was thrust into the spotlight when a village priest, Don Bartolomeo Sgabarizza, began investigating Paolo Gasparotto, a local Benandante, who claimed he could heal a child cursed by witches. At first, Sgabarizza dismissed Gasparotto's strange accounts of spirit battles, but in 1580, the Inquisitor Fra Felice de Montefalco reopened the case. Under formal questioning, Gasparotto described being born with a caul, leaving his body at night, and battling witches with fennel. Soon after, another Benandante, Battista Moduco, was interrogated and echoed these extraordinary claims. To the Inquisition, these tales resembled the witches' Sabbath, night flights, secret rituals, and dealings with spirits. But the Benandanti insisted they were not witches, but defenders of the faith, fighting evil in Christ's name. Their stories lacked the usual signs of heresy: no devil, no pacts, no desecration. They didn't fit the church's binary of good versus evil. Trial records reveal this clash of worldviews. On one side, poor peasants trying to explain a visionary tradition grounded in agriculture and spirit travel. On the other, learned theologians determined to categorize their beliefs as diabolical. The inquisitors pushed relentlessly. Was Gasparotto's angel truly divine or a demon in disguise? Were their feasts innocent or the Sabbath in secret? The gulf between belief and dogma had never been more stark. Despite their strange claims, the early response of the Friulian Inquisition to the Benandanti was relatively mild compared to the brutal witch hunts elsewhere in Europe. Many were sentenced to penance or exile rather than execution. Judges may have found their stories too bizarre to be true heresy, and the Venetian authorities, wary of unchecked inquisitorial power, may have helped temper the Church's response. The Benandanti's positive role as healers and protectors also likely earned them some local support. Yet, investigations continued for generations, as inquisitors struggled to categorize the persistent mystery of the good walkers. From 1575 to 1675, the Benandanti were repeatedly interrogated. Over time, under pressure, their beliefs began to shift. Faced with literate, powerful judges intent on framing them as diabolical, many peasants, some illiterate, struggled to defend their tradition. The Inquisition's persistent questioning gradually reshaped the Benandanti's own understanding of who they were. Later trial records show a painful transformation. Under sustained pressure, some Benandanti began to admit to things their predecessors had denied, seeing the devil, committing forbidden acts, or renouncing their faith. Even Gasparotto and Moduco eventually conceded that their guiding angel might have been a demon. The good walkers, once defenders against witches, were coerced into identifying as witches themselves. It's a powerful example of how belief can be altered by institutional pressure and psychological strain. Alongside this outside pressure, internal cracks also emerged. As the trials made their powers known, some began to exploit their reputation, charging for healing or accusing neighbors of witchcraft, possibly out of rivalry or greed. These acts blurred the line between protector and persecutor, damaging the trust that once shielded the Benandanti and making their tradition even more vulnerable. By the mid-1600s, the Benandanti disappeared from history. Centuries of scrutiny, forced reinterpretation of their beliefs, and internal decline led to the collapse of their unique tradition. In a bitter twist, the word Benandante, once meaning good walker, became another term for witch in Friulian folklore. A haunting reminder of how persecution can not only silence a culture, but also rewrite its meaning entirely. The Benandanti, the dream warriors of Friuli, faded into obscurity, their unique beliefs suppressed and reshaped by the dominant narrative of witchcraft. What survives are haunting traces in the Inquisition's records, biased but meticulously preserved. It wasn't until the 1960s that historian Carlo Ginzburg rediscovered these forgotten testimonies. His groundbreaking work, The Night Battles, offered an unexpected glimpse into a world where folklore, faith, and the fears of rural life intertwined. Historians still debate the Benandanti's origins. Were they remnants of an ancient pre-Christian fertility cult, as Ginzburg proposed, or a distinct local tradition born from the cultural anxieties of agrarian Friuli? While the idea of a surviving pagan lineage is compelling, some question whether the evidence supports such continuity. Still, the Benandanti reveal a time when the lines between dream and waking, spirit and matter, Christianity and folk magic were far more fluid than we often imagine. The story of the Benandanti is a haunting reflection of the clash between living tradition and institutional power. Once symbols of hope, healing, and protection, they were slowly redefined, then erased, by the very forces that claim to preserve the truth. And yet their voices endure, hidden within the dusty archives of their persecutors. As a cornerstone of microhistory, their tale continues to illuminate the fragile boundary between faith and folklore, dream and doctrine. The good walkers may no longer roam the night fields of Friuli, but their presence lingers like a whisper carried on the wind, echoes from a forgotten dream.